Hello and welcome to Season of War. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm excited to talk about this past weekend and the Grand Clash Grand Tournament out in Trois-Rivières, Quebec, Canada. It was an awesome time, so lots to talk about. Well, already some questions in the chat. Guys, thank you first and foremost for joining tonight. I'm excited again to talk about this. Excited to talk about Slaanesh. I'm excited to answer questions in all regards, so keep them coming throughout the night. That's the main thing. With this, obviously, got some information that I want to talk about with the recap, but I really want to, provide what value and information I can. So any questions are more than welcome. And diving right into things. So Grand Clash, as I said, is Canada's biggest GT consistently for the past few years. It's the best GT. I love it. I've gone for 3 years in a row now. I got best overall last year, so I was hoping to defend the title this year. Not for best overall, but at least the generalmanship. So yeah, Canada's biggest GT, 146 players this year, so a good spread. Like 1/3 of the field was KO, it felt like. And yeah, Slaanesh, first time playing Slaanesh. I did see a question earlier from Chase, what made me make the switch to Slaanesh? I've kind of been feeling, the reason I chose Slaanesh, I've kind of been feeling like I haven't found my army for like a season. I typically like to play like one army primarily throughout a year, and I've been playing a lot of Chaos the past like 6 months. It was Tzeentch and then Slaves. I really enjoyed Slaves because previous to that it was like Tzeentch and Lumineth, and I kind of got burnt out on how not headstrong, but like how intense those armies can be to play. I enjoy those aspects of those armies, but just was excited to switch up and take a break from the the intensity of those armies, just everything you have to think about and consider, and move to Slaves just to have a little fun and mix things up. I was excited for the new army. I was painting a bunch of stuff up, which I want to go back and revisit. And yeah, so Slaves was a nice break. Played Slaves for a couple months, practiced and tested with them a bunch, and then kind of was at the point where it's like, okay, I'm ready to. Slaves is a little one-dimensional, so after like, even probably played 6 events with mostly small GTs or small RTTs with Slaves, and was at the point where it's like, okay, I would like to go back to something a little more multi-dimensional. And Slaanesh, that was around the time Slaanesh was coming out. I had actually a Slaanesh collection I'd been slowly building. I bought some stuff from my buddy Anthony. Then we got a ton of stuff through our channel partner Warpfire. So Jordan and Warpfire actually at LVO passed over a bunch of Slaanesh stuff, which helped build the army up. And just working on the army for the channel. Didn't have it ready in time for Slaanesh's release. And then borrowed a Slaanesh army from our buddy Dave to play those 2 games on the channel during our Slaanesh week. This is a long story, but yeah, from there, loved the army at first glance. Instantly felt at home playing it, so the play style was a good connection for me. Felt very much like things I was used to in Deepkin. Reavers, Eels, it's very similar, a lot of similarities, so felt at home playing the army. Some new tools. I always loved the model range with the mortals, so with the new battle tome making it viable and already working on the army for the channel, it just kind of was a natural thing. And yeah, just like everybody, you get excited about new things sometimes, and just fit my playstyle, I think. Kind of so a collection of a multitude of things. is why I jumped on Slaanesh. I've played a bunch of slaves. I wasn't like coming into this GT. Didn't feel like there was anything I had to play. There's no army that I'm stuck on again for this next year or whatever, however many months are left from the ITC season. So just kind of felt free to choose something else and airbrushed my army up like the day before I left real quick. It wasn't the prettiest, but made for a fun time. And no better way to learn an army than to play 5 games at an event. So, do I find it hard to learn a faction for competitive play? That's a really good question, Lord Billy. So, with the channel, and you specifically mentioned having to switch so many armies, it's actually very hard for me to find testing time to like practice for a GT or practice with a list. For Slaanesh, for example, I had the 2 games with the army on the channel during the Slaanesh week, and then I think I had 2 practice games with Oliver before Grand Clash, and then some like noodling just on TTS by myself. So not a ton of experience. I think I only had 1 game with my actual list, but again, even from those first games with Slaanesh, while there's the rules and stuff to learn, the playstyle was very at home for me. So I didn't find there was a big learning curve in that regard. And the mechanics are fairly straightforward, especially with the sub-faction. My whole sub-faction is just getting extra CP. So there's not like rules to remember or, some of the other sub-factions, there's like certain timing you got to be on top of, or if you wouldn't, different things like that. So it was like a layer of rules that were like very minimal to remember. So with Slaanesh, I didn't find it too troubling to learn the army, and was really happy with how the Grand Clash went. Having had not much, only a couple games with Slaanesh, but something that's a little more unfamiliar would definitely be trouble. I played like 1 game with KO in their release week, and man, way too many like synergies and overlapping buffs and stuff for you to pick up and play that quickly. So it's definitely army dependent. KO is very different play style than I'm used to. Not natural for me. And then throw in again all those different units, different profiles, multiple shooting weapons profiles on 1 unit. Tons of different ranges and abilities to use, different timing. There's a lot. So definitely situational. And Slaanesh was fairly easy to pick up. Josh, you were missed, though I think the event was better for you not being there. Couldn't have handled all that beauty at the event. There's enough beauty hammer there already. Though you and Yuri and many others were missed. Did I run? Oh, well, I did run into KO. We'll talk to that in a little bit. But sounds like we can jump right into things. Ideneth versus Slaanesh. Ideneth I have a ton of history with and love that I've put into that army. It's still my best hobby army, just from the time I've been able to put into it. So nothing will compare there, but Slaanesh is very fun. What's up, Prussian? How are you doing? Things are good. It's great to be home. Hope you had a great weekend as well. Temptation dice are awesome, and we'll talk about that more. But jumping into things. So my list was Pretenders. As I mentioned, it is a sub-faction where you get 3 extra command points, or not extra. You get 3 command points for your general each turn instead of 1. And then your general can issue a command. Whenever they issue a command, they can issue it to 3 units. The second and third time being later in that phase. Similar to like a Maw Crusher. We're all very familiar with that. Welcome to the membership, Anthony. And I think I saw a big love from Burin's Penguins. So that's one of the awesome teams out in Quebec. We got a lot of friends over there. I can't, your picture's too small for me to tell, but if that's Tony, what's up, buddy? It's good to hear from you, and it was great to see you at Clash. Sad we didn't get to play for the third time though. Anyways, Pretender, so a lot of CP. There's just some very strong things you can do with this army. You know, multiple redeploys, multiple all-out attacks, multiple unleash hells, multiple inspiring presences. All those things are very valuable. I took the grand strategy Selfish Desire. I was torn between this one and the one where you just generate 36 depravity. I chose Selfish Desire, which is the one just not summon at all, for two reasons. One, it's guaranteed, and unlike the other battle or grand strategy where you have to generate 36, I felt this was more. It is guaranteed, so long as you want it to be. But 36 isn't for sure that you're going to get that amount. Most of my opponents were all my opponents were actually very smart about giving me or taking the mortal wounds early when they could afford to, and then trying to prevent me from getting depravity. But I think at least 4 of my 5 games, I still got to 36. Though I think there are some armies and matchups where you won't get to 36. Something like Slaves with a bunch of Varendard, again, having tested that with Oliver. Nurdle with their ward saves and some other stuff that doesn't care about mortals. They're not gonna, you're good chance you don't get to 36. And even if you do, you're not getting beyond 36 to be able to summon something and stay at 36 necessarily. Possible, but it's hard. I think it's our first thing to summon. I don't even remember, like 18 points. Honestly, I've barely looked at it because second reason I didn't take it, I don't have a summoning pool. Just got this army built and barely painted. So it was just, for multiple reasons, this one made sense. And guarantees are nice. It did allow me a little bit to try in some of my games to almost forget about my grand strategy and just try with keeping my opponents in mind to try and deny theirs. Didn't always work out, sadly. General, Contorted Epitome, obvious choice here. Strength of Godhood gives him +1 rend, or them +1 rend and +1 damage on their combat profiles, of which they have 11 attached, so that's really good. Crown of Dark Secrets. Choose a unit at the start of your first hero phase, and if the bearer is within 6 of that enemy unit, their attack profiles in combat are reduced to 1. Really good against strong enemy units. We saw that one to effect on the channel before with one of our first games. And then Lore Spell was Born of Damnation, which is just generating on average 3 depravity a turn. So it just helped me get to that 12 mark. And then Fueled by Durish Rage, being that it's really important for my general to be alive and survive. Only came up once, but I rolled the 3 up, so it was very handy. Epitome is great as a hero. Again, my general is pivotal to the army, so things that are great. It's a GC, so it can't be shot. It has a 2-up ward save, so it can't really be affected by magic too much. And you can't use command abilities, use or receive within 3 inches of it, and you can't retreat from it. Bunch of good tools. I feel like I'm missing something. But then I had Bellator allied in. Great ability. I think it really was at home in Slaanesh of being able to lock down a key unit. This army is obviously fairly weak. I'm all 5 and 6 up saves. I've got some wound density, but I'm squishy, low bravery, so Bellator is actually almost the best defense for my army. And yeah, Matthew, you're 100% right. I only felt that in one game. really. But with Selfish Desire, the grand strategy, once you get to 36 summoning points, or sorry, depravity points, your opponent knows you're not going to summon, or likely not going to. So they stop taking the mortal wounds and just take the depravity every time, or give you the depravity every time. So it did in 2 games, I think it was. I felt like it's like, okay, I hit the 36 mark on like turn 3 or 4, and we just forgot about the mechanic for the rest of the game. Though you still have -1 hit, exploding 6s, and a 5 up ward, so it's not the worst thing. But it did allow my opponent to kind of just stop taking those mortals. Battle line, 2 units of 20 bliss barbs, or 22, and then 1 unit of 11. A lot of shots, potentially at Rend 2 with the Seekers. It is a lot of shooting. The Lord of Pain is an interesting addition. I originally had him, Hipster, in here before going to Bellator. Bellator, I feel like, gives me a chance in my bad matchups and makes my good matchups even more dominant. So it's like, I think it's a really good choice. Felt like a really good choice and fit to take Bellator. Lord of Pain is interesting, but I don't think, at least with the makeup of my list, it was really worth it. With my heavy reliance or usage of the Bliss Barbs, +1 to hit, I'm already getting from being able to use all out attack 3 times. So don't need the +1 hit. And my Bliss Barbs can't benefit from the +1 to wound, because they already have it on their War Scroll to bring them from 4s to 3s. Now that said, both those are nice if your opponent makes you -1 to hit or -1 to wound. Talked about it later. I suffered from that in one particular game. But there's multiple armies that have those debuffs, so yeah, be prepared. So it's a nice to have, not a need to have. Again, Lord of Pain is also very like situationally tough to use in terms of the objective placement on the missions. You know, you might not want to whip him into the middle of the board to tag an objective, and then he's not really doing anything for you. So Lord of Pain is interesting. Had him in here, took him out for Bellator as well as some other things. Same with the Lord of Hubris. He was neat, he was cute, he has cool ability, but just wasn't you really utilizing it enough. For other units, I had 2 units of Bliss Barb Seekers, Slick Blade Seekers. These are the combat guys, 5 of them. 2 5s. I've seen a bunch of people with 10s. I like the 5s because you know, losing, they're squishy, so they can go down fast, and breaking up your unit means it has to be targeted in 2 separate activations. Also, you can whip 5 forward to generate some depravity, use it as your buffer in your screen, and then you still have another one. This army, I did feel a lacking in combat damage at times. Overall, the list was fine. Because the shooting output is what carries the army. The combat is more just to generate depravity, clear screens, clear chaff, and finish things off. Bellator actually was useful in this list as like kind of a 3rd combat unit. So that was handy. 5 Bliss Barb Seekers. So these are the mounted guys. When they shoot and hit and wound something, makes them that unit -1 to save. Really good, especially with all the shooting. I originally had 2 units in the list, dropped 1 when I put in Bellator. This was definitely a pain point for the list. There's ways I could have played it better, but often I had to use one or another unit of Slick Blades or Bliss Barb Seekers in general as screens, so it was, you know, tough to keep my Bliss Barb Seekers protected, and most of my opponents were really smart in trying to pick them out early if they had the capacity to. So 2 games in particular, my final 2 games, I wasn't really able to, they didn't survive long enough for me to make use of them, and that hurts the army when I invest so heavily into shooting and it's reduced to Rend 1. not obviously bad because it's still huge volume, but it takes a key piece out of the list. Lastly, I have 10 Undors in here. They're coalition allies, so that's why I can be, they don't count towards the ally limit, which Bellator mostly takes up. And honestly, if I had the points, I would take like another unit or two of these. They were awesome. If we see any points changes and I keep playing Slaanesh, in the future, I could see dropping, down to 40 Bliss Barbs and filling up the points with another unit of Undors or two or something. Just great screens. They can retreat out of combat when they activate to stay alive. It's super handy, cheap, fast. They're 7-inch movement. They get +1 to run. So if you run them, they're moving minimum 9. Great for a screen. All around, all stars. Rally on 5s, though I never really made use of that. Train piece, which did nothing for me in any of my games, and then, other than blocking and being annoying. And then double battle regiment, and came in at 1975, took the Indomitable Triumph, just because I was worried about maybe somebody having stuff that turns off battle shock or CP usage, and it gave me a little redundancy. Didn't come up in any of my games. I used it maybe once or twice throughout the tournament, but that's it. So, hope that wasn't too long. Tried to dive into the list a little bit. Definitely a lot of shooting, and filled my enemies full of arrows. Not too far off from like my old Deepkin list of having a lot of shooting and then like some combat pieces and some pinning pieces. So yeah, then that's the list. So I don't have pictures. I took pictures of like 2 of my games afterwards, but they're not even great pictures. So I actually whipped up a quick little map so we can talk about our games, or the games that I played. So JF, was great seeing you guys at Clash. Didn't get to fight any of you this time. But thanks for doing this. Yeah, no, Clash is, again, amazing. So many awesome people. Love the community out there. I honestly want to go out there for like more events, but life and family make all that hard. But I would love to make it out there for more events. I always have so much fun. So looking at this beautiful map that I have drawn, let's do some coloring. So this is the terrain placement for my round 1 against Gloomspite Gits. We got their Loon Shrine up here in the top. Obviously, drawing from my perspective, I was on the bottom. And this piece right here was my terrain piece. I'm not doing this to talk a little bit about deployment, so we can focus on that a little bit throughout this mission, or not mission, this stream. And then kind of just quickly walk you through the beats of games. But in general, I think I screened out here with Undor. I put Bellator here with Slick Blades here. So Bellator was clogging up most of the lane. I often can use him as a screen against some armies. And then Slick Blades here, Bliss Barb Seekers behind, and then a bunch of archers in there. My opponent, I was outdropping my opponent and playing Gits. So I knew I would have choice. He had, I think, it was like, it was a mixed arms force. He had 2 units of 5 Boin Drop Bounders, a unit of 10 Boin Drop Bounders, a unit of 10 just Squid Hoppers, and then 3 Stone Trolls, 6 Fellwater Trolls. So I think the 6 Fellwater Trolls were there. These were Boin Drop Bounders, more Boin Drop Bounders, and then Hoppers over here. Being that I outdropped him, I went pretty hard to one side, and I think the other Trolls were here. Went pretty hard to one side. Again, screening out with my cheap stuff. I had a lot of Seekers in behind, or sorry, Bliss Barbs in behind. if he charges in, I have the Unleash Hell. So with this deployment, I really kind of want to pivot to one side early and then deal with half of my opponent's army and then try to push towards the center. I did give my opponent first, and he whipped 2 units of Oingrots into Bellator, actually, Bounders, which is smart play. Impact Mortals. He actually almost took out Bellator top of 1, and I hadn't used his ability, so that would have been bad. So this was a little bit of overestimation, or maybe underestimation of just remembering with all the different layering buffs how fast the Gits can be. But because this terrain pace might not be to scale, but one of the units actually charged in here and was trying to pile around, and actually took out 2/3 of that unit in the Unleash Hell, so it was less for Bellator to take. I don't want to go through it obviously turn by turn, it's a lot. Just kind of the main beats of the story. Both those units, well, he got close to killing Bellator because I rolled poorly on the saves. It was definitely a high risk, high reward play. Didn't quite pay off, and I ended up between combat and the Unleash Hell clearing both of those units of Bounders on his turn. Though he brought one back, 3 models at the end of his turn anyways, so that helped recycle. But the big things are, then on my turn, my Slit Blades went over here, set up to, and then minced the Squid Hoppers. I think there was like 2 or 3 left, but crippled them, generated me 16, 18 depravity, so I was up to the 12 mark on turn 1, which is really, for in my experience, like the main thing you're shooting for is just get to 12 as soon as you can. Anything else after that is bonus. I don't know, this isn't gonna sound very exciting, but from here, honestly, I shot my opponent with a lot of arrows in the middle. The Fell Waters moved to the middle. I focused most of my shooting on the 10 Boeing Drop Bounders, and after taking out the 3 Rockgut Trogs, and I got the double in this game, so always a great thing about giving away the turn. Got the double. On the double, Bellator, went from the objective, ran over here, smashed to rubble the Loon Shrine. I then finished off the 3 Squid Hoppers, the 10 Boeing Drop Bounders, and a few other things. I think my other Slick Blades were up here harassing his not Squid Herd, didn't have Squid Herd, but the Sneaky Snufflers. So a lot of crazy stuff going on. I don't know how helpful this map actually is, unless you're watching the entire time I'm drawing, but that was basically it. I left the 6 Fellwater Trogs untouched, not putting any effort into trying to put in damage on them, knowing that I had Bellator. Even there's multiple fail points for them not to do anything, even if I throw Bellator's or fail Bellator's ability. The Dark Master. In the movement, there's also charge and combat, shooting too, but that's not as impactful. So all in, Bellator, the Fellwaters, he got the turn, or I gave him the turn into 3, I don't remember which. And just by that point, with the Loon Shrine down, crippled a bunch of his big units, his Fellwaters were tied up, there was just nothing really left for him to do, and I finished them off on my turn. And yeah, that's it. We are live. Tristan, what's up, buddy? I don't know how interesting or helpful the drawing was, so you can give me that feedback. But at least there's some visuals. All in, I think there are other Gits lists that could definitely, like Gits in general could be trouble for this army, depending on the list. I haven't practiced much against a lot of things, so we'll find out. Round 2 was against my buddy Fred from Tough Crowd and his Flesh Eater Torts. He had cool list. He had the Incarnate, 9 Flayers with a bunch of recursion, so Basically, unless you kill all 9 flayers, he's bringing them all back. And then the dual chain on Terrorgeist, who's chomping stuff up. So deployment. Let's see. Deployment wise. Fred had his dual chain on Terrorgeist up here. Flayers in the back, he was pretty conservative. Incarnate over here. And a bunch of heroes scattered from out. This was his terrain piece. This was mine. I seen his terrain piece deployment, and again being outdropping Fred here. I screened, I think, with Undor here, and then Slick Blades here, and then put most of my shooting here, with Bellator up here to kind of threaten this objective. And then some Slick Blades in behind, Bliss Barbs in the center, Bliss Barb Seekers, sorry. And that was kind of my rough deployment. The way this one played out, again, having choice, always notable, especially with an army as like potentially with as devastating firepower as mine has. Or something like Teo just moving into shooting range and getting shot isn't a great turn 1 plan. So Fred played this very smart. He nipped on to the outside objectives with some duels and relatively kept his units kind of on the back of the board. Often the plan is, if your opponent gives you first, or a great plan, and this is what Fred did, is play very conservative, very reserved, even at limiting your own output, and play it conservative so that you can hopefully give away the turn to your opponent and then get the double back. Because moving up, if anything comes to this center objective, it's getting shot and dying. So always a good strategy, like especially for combat armies. Fred was setting himself up for success, and yeah. What else from here? I basically, put Slick Blades over here, clear this objective of the duels. The only thing to really threaten it was the dual chain on Terrorgeist. And I didn't really push anything besides those Slick Blades over here. I moved the Undor to the middle screen and most of my force up to the middle, putting me in position where, with priority, I could actually threaten his backline stuff. Bellator went and fought this thing. There was the risk with the Incarnate that it kills Bellator eventually. But that's dicey. And I kind of threw it in trying to bait the Incarnate out there to the corner of the battlefield. Even if it kills Bellator, it's, Bellator's likely would have, or by shooting over those turns is, chipping it down or bringing it down levels. And oh god, what else? Honestly, from here, Fred did win priority and was taking each turn, which was allowing me to burn objectives and keep him on the back foot scoring wise, and he had to start playing more and more aggressive. And really, like with kind of my first game, I use my fast combat pieces to kind of store objectives and harass while my firepower is blasting away once you come in close, and that's the name of the game. Fred kept this one really close actually, though. He was getting the priorities on his side, so I was keeping him in the game. No double from my army was made, and eventually, I think there was only the center and the bottom right objective left. Dual chain on Terrorgeist was down, and he just had his 9 flayers, and I had all my shooting. And so the flayers stood in the middle for a turn, held the objective, and promptly, bravely fell to a hail of arrows. I don't know how exciting this is going to be. Recap is basically going to be like, I shot things. And then I shot things some more. Round 3 versus Loic and his Idneth Deepkin. Deepkin was actually a matchup I was kind of fearing, just with the potential to control shooting. The way this one played out, and maybe Loic's list, I think, wasn't, the worst matchup for me. He had a turtle, 30 thralls, and then turtle, 30 thralls, 2x10 reavers, another 10 thralls, and then a smattering of the small heroes. I was planning to Bellator the turtle. Didn't happen. Oh, sorry. I was planning to Bellator the thralls. Didn't end up doing that. The thralls, Loic had put, so his boats here and here. This is my shrine. We are all kind of clogging up lanes. But it did stop Loic from, he was kind of slowly funneling his thralls through that lane on his turn 1. Didn't get a ton of them on. We were both 2 drops and he had actually given me first. And I just barely touched the objective with Undoors. Bellator, Slit stayed back here. And then the majority of my kind of shooting output sat here. And screened out with Slit Blades over here. And then I think I just had my 10 Bliss Barbs there. So this is Loic's turtle. Similar to what I just explained when I gave away turn and how Fred played against me, I didn't do any shooting turn 1. Loic again smartly giving me the turn. I just touched the objective with the Undor, got them on there to store it, and touched the left one. But basically put Loic in a position, especially on this mission, where, okay, now I stored max points. If Loic wants to keep up with me, he's got to take the center objective. But I'm so far back that he's not really engaging me turn 1. And then he's coming into my threat ranges, though, for shooting. A double back, if he plays super aggressive, could benefit him. But I didn't use Bellator's ability turn 1 because I didn't really feel a threat. But if he wins priority, I get to Bellator either the 30 thralls or the turtle, whichever feels like a bigger threat. But here I won priority and kind of went all in on the engagement. He had 10 thralls and 10 reavers up here. The Eidolon was down here on this objective. Another 10 reavers back here. And turtle there. I deal with the thralls and the reavers in shooting, but because I can only target 1 unit, I can't split shots, so I have to put my big units into those, which is overkill, but it's not the end of the world. I did put the 10 Bliss Barb unit into the 30 thralls, who are again kind of funneling through that narrow passage with the boat, and then my Slit Blades and Bellator, I didn't actually plan to go in there, but after my shooting output, I kind of pivoted from the objective and the Eidolon to going into the thralls. I am talking about fantasy Warhammer tabletop game. It's called Age of Sigmar now. And we're talking about my games that I played on the weekend at a grand tournament. Canada's biggest one. And yeah, I ended up doing like 24 wounds to the thralls. Even like they were by the boats, they had 5 up ward, but again, it was just getting more damage with their low saves than I kind of expected. So I threw the Slip Blades and everything in, crippled that unit to a point where it's not near as effective as it was, obviously. I assume I got my 12 depravity, I think, here. So, or was close to it, maybe. But it basically this unit, while not dead, and he's recurring models, I think he was backside at 9 at the end of my turn, is not the scary unit that it used to be. So he actually on bottom of 2, in fear of it dying, I think there was 3 models left, so I did 27 damage to it on my turn between different sources. So he backed that unit out so he could start recurring models and not die. And this bottom 2, I Bellator the turtle, so then the turtle's just kind of a sitting duck there. Turn 3 priority goes my way as well. All my shooting goes into taking down the turtle, and then I'm kind of harassing and trying to finish off the thralls. Grievers and the Eidolon kind of still sticking around because he's tanky. But in conclusion, I shot a lot of things. It's easy to like, I hope if there's a takeaway you guys are getting, it's about positioning and deployment in that, because it's easy to say, oh, my stuff shot other stuff off the table, or, you know, killed these units, or same thing with slaves. My unit went into combat and killed this unit. But it's the positioning and the movement and the placement of the units that allows those things to happen and allows you to be doing those rather than your opponent. So it's not that Slaanesh, I think, is a strong army, has lots of great tools, don't get me wrong, but a lot of armies are in that position. There's a lot of strong armies. Loic, this game went, you know, very much my way, especially with their early priorities. But he went 4-1 at that event, which is awesome. So it's not to say Deepkin doesn't have the tools to do well. I think here, the boat placement, I like the boat placement, excuse me, from a perspective of Loic was utilizing the ward saves for a lot of the time. But again, actually put him in a position where his thralls were really stretched out, trying to move through in kind of a narrow 3-inch gap. So that was like a thing that in hindsight, I had noticed that, like, okay, I was able to kind of take advantage of that, and it allowed me to go into the thralls without fear of like only killing 5 and the other 20 remaining, you know, kill me back, because they were pretty spread out. He also, actually, little thing just to be aware of, he had redeployed models from the thralls to take the objective, which in hindsight with the damage that I put in wasn't worth it. And it actually, the thing we both realized afterwards is his redeploy to try and take the objective from me pulled him outside of the ward range of his boat, actually. So he didn't have the 5-up ward, at least in shooting. He probably did by the time casualties were pulled in combat, but one way or another, something to be aware of and careful of. So there's my beautiful drawing for round 3. Round 4. I got a question earlier. I saw it. Someone was asking about KO. Taita did 4-1 with the Sons of Bahamut at Clash, which is awesome. Great result. Very impressive for Sons of Bahamut. They are an army that is not got any GCs, which makes life tough. Rodol asked about, did I run into any KO? As they could be oppressive, and I was definitely fearful of KO, and my round 4 was against KO. So this is the mission: position overpower. These W's are Wildwoods, and again, I was fearful of KO. I played Carl Thursday night, Friday night in a test game with his KO, and was not comfortable with that match, or didn't love that matchup. And this list was interesting though. I think Thunderers are, to my list, much scarier. But my opponent, Godfroy, he was playing 3 frigates, each with 6 engine riggers inside. So it was one with a 6, and then 4 3 blocks, 2 in each other frigate. And I had choice. I gave him first. I deployed what I thought was pretty smartly, but turns out there's always lots to learn. So with this mission, I deployed my Undor kind of in a screen over here. I deployed some Slick Blades over here. and then Bellator, more Slick Blades, Bliss Barb Seekers, Bliss Barbs, Epitome in the center. So this was roughly my deployment. Dodfoy had 3 frigates. He was maybe even a little more conservative than that. He sat them back, and thinking about this match, because this was game 4, so the first game of day 2, you have all night to think about it. We knew what our matchups were based on the standings, and I thought, now this is trying to bit me. Thinking about this matchup, the right play is to give away turn, unless my opponent was to deploy right on the line and put himself in threat range where I can go blast his boats. If I can, get enough shooting to take down a boat, it's worth making that play and taking first potentially. Especially, you don't mind taking first as much with Bellator because he protects you against the double. Helps protect you against the double. What else? So the frigates were deployed far enough back that I couldn't get into them turn 1, so I'm giving away the turn. But I decided not to Bellator because the distance that he was at, I figured meant he was going to have some long charges or 9-inch charges with one boat. And I know he's got a 3d6, but I didn't think he would be getting all 3 boats in. Didn't think. But what I forgot about was the Navigator. When I practiced with Carl, he had used that ability to slow my units down and played a much more conservative game. So that's kind of what I was expecting. I felt the play, from the Slaanesh perspective, what I was worried about the KO player doing, like God4 doing, is putting a boat over here, not tagging that objective, putting a boat over here on the back, and trying to dance around and stay, outside of my threat ranges and outscore me. So that's kind of what I was expecting. So I didn't Bellator turn 1. Also, with the position of the boats, feeling like he wasn't going to be able to throw them all in. Turns out, again, forgot about the Navigator. He rolled 3 6s, so got to move all his boats, and they all moved 5 inches, if I recall correctly. So instead of, thinking he's going to dance around and I'm going to be, counterattacking, trying to deal with one and then push into the center, kind of a, standard strategy. Those 3 frigates went here, here, and here. I put my train piece in the middle to help screen and block space. And basically he whipped in 18 or 3 frigates. A couple of cool things to talk about in terms of the interactions here. Because of my depravity points, they're very scary for riggers at 2 wounds and no mortal wound save. And again, very elite, only 18 of them in his list, and that's all his output really, or the majority of it besides the boats. He elected to not shoot with 4 of the 6 riggers, with the effort of, or the goal of not taking depravity, or didn't want to trigger the mortal wounds or give me depravity because the -1 would be crippling as well, or could be crippling as well. So all in, he did a bunch of shooting with the boats. He actually tripled one of my units of Bliss Barbs, brought it down to like 6. Killed a Slick Blade, or sorry, Bliss Barb Seeker or 2. Left the Slick Blades on, did a bunch of damage to this unit in front, killed 2 in shooting, killed my Ondor in shooting. These boats charged into the remaining 2 Slick Blades. And here's some interesting interactions. So it was clear, I haven't looked at it from the new KO Battle Tome. It was clear in the old book that you can unleash hell on the stuff in the boat. That's normal. But I don't think that covers the rules for the disembarking riggers after they charge. So when they all charge, they're all eligible targets, and then they disembark from the boat. It's kind of, I think, unclear. You would assume that the intention isn't. Yeah, it's kind of a gray area where there's not that situation isn't specifically addressed with Unleash Hell, because let's say now the boat and the raiders outside of the boat are both within 3. Does that make it so that the opposing units can't unleash hell now because there's already a unit within 3, or there's 2 units within 3? Now they arrived at the same time. We ended up grabbing the TO, Alex, who is a KO player himself, so he has a good understanding, and his ruling was that they are still eligible targets from the charge, and you can't kind of use that gimmick to avoid Unleash Hell, which, my opponent was thinking that was possible, so I'm sure, was disappointed, understandably, to learn that, like, in the middle of a tight game. I'm not to say, obviously, from my perspective, it's easy to say I think that was the right ruling when it favors me. So rather than talking about my opinion, I went and looked at with AOS Worlds coming up, what if they had done anything in terms of FAQs for that situation, in which they did, and they, rather than, I don't know how they changed the wording or what specifically they changed, but it was mostly that any units charging in one charge are eligible, which kind of addressed the fact of multiple units charging together as one. Ruled it the same way that Alex did, so I think, yeah, that's a good way to rule it. Something looks suggestive here, maybe. Lots of sketches, lots of circles, and weird shapes. But, odd situation. Anyways, ended up being able to unleash hell. Took out 3 raiders, that had jumped over my screen here. 3 raiders jumped outside. 3 raiders had sat back here. 3 raiders in this boat. I killed 2 of the 6 that came in here. But with all those charges, he had ripped through 1 full unit of my slick blades. I killed my Bliss Barb Seekers, and again, this is where only having the 1 unit of Bliss Barb Seekers hurt. Killed all my Ondor, but left me with 36 of my 50 Slit Blade Seekers. Now again here, should have Bellator turn 1, because of the possibility of this play, I forgot about the hero phase movement potential, which is what made me not safe when I thought I was safe. So, something to be aware of with KO, and it was a good learning for me. All in though, after that, I did a lot of shooting. On my turn, between the Slick Blades, the other unit came around backdoor here to finish off the unit of 4 Bliss Barb, 4 Endrin Raiders. The Slick Blade, or the Bliss Barbs, shot into a bunch of the boats and chipped a bunch of stuff down with the help of Depravity. Bellator went in and tied up these 2 boats, and from there it was relatively safe. I lost the priorities, I want to say, but it was just kind of comfortable. Yeah, I lost the priorities, but it was comfortable enough where I had dealt with all his damage output. He alphaed super hard, didn't get enough damage into like the kind of meat of my own damage output, so I was able to kind of mop it up, and over the next 3 turns, finish his army off. The noteworthy thing in this one though is with how aggressive he is, he nor I had any chance to jump on these outer objectives, so we didn't. It was like very low scoring. I think I scored 3. We were 9-9 going into round 4 because we had just gotten hold 1 and battle tactics each. But round 4 onwards, I got 5 points each turn, and then 3 for my grand strategy. So I ended up 22-9, and a very bloody game, very intense right from the start. So unfortunately exhausted after that one, and yeah, was thankful we had a lunch break, though we went pretty late on time. Well, Riposte, I'll talk about the Slaanesh a little more at the end, and Temptation specifically. Are you glad I never have to? Yeah. Lord Billy, the Blissbarb archers were not the most fun to build. There's just so many parts. They're not hard. They're just a ton of parts. But all the mortals are cool units, and I'm excited to get this army painted up. But yeah, don't really want to build anymore. 55 is hopefully enough. All right, into round 5. Since round 2, I think, so round 2 onwards, I was actually first in the standings. Based on the games, I was generating lots of victory points. High score and victory points was kind of the first ranking pairing metric after wins. So I went in first, and I was playing the guy who was in second, Alexei, who was an awesome player, awesome dude, playing Sylvaneth. And I was actually fearful of this matchup. Because, well, first of all, he had the Spellsinger with the Warsong Revenant, AoE Mortal Wounds. He had the anti-horde spell, so he's potentially nuking down any of my units. And then he's, on 5-up mortals. Killing 8 guys is crippling, or it could be. And then he also had allied in 3 Knight Vexlors from Stormcast, giving him 3 more GCs, and he was doing the GC drain strategy. And some devastating AoE mortal wound potential, potentially 3d3 mortal wounds to your entire army if you allow that to happen. Which I did not. He also had Durthu, Drycha, and then a bunch of other heroes. He basically sat all his heroes at the back of the board. So Warsong Revenant, Durthu, Drycha. He had, I think, 2 units or 3 units of Dryads. He had 2 units of Tree Revenants to teleport around. And then he had the War Band that has the +1 to wound spell. And the Knight Vexlors. So I actually deployed most of my Blissbarb Seekers like along the back board edge. I put my Ungor here because I didn't care if they damaged. This was an overgrown terrain feature. This was an overgrown terrain feature. We had Wildwood, and then this was an overgrown terrain feature. So we had a pretty good selection of features here based on this terrain. And this is one mission. I found it in a practice game, and I found it here where sometimes I want to use mostly I want to use my my terrain feature to clog up the board. I don't think that was worthwhile, and I think it actually really hurt me in this matchup. Because Alexei's really combat output is Durthu and Drycha, and he's not worried about frontage with them, so it doesn't, even if I limit this gap to 3 inches, he's getting them 1 or both in there if he wants to. Outside of these Blissbarbs, I had deployed my Slickblade Seekers here and here as my screens. Both of them were outside of 10 inches of the overgrown terrain features, so if Durthu wanted to try and teleport and charge, well, it's a 9-inch charge, it would bring him outside wholly within 9 of those overgrown terrain features, so he wouldn't be able to strike and fade away. So again, comes from knowing Sylvaneth, and I was able to mitigate that. Gave away first. Alexei, turn 1, summoned a tree here, did some mortal wounds to my Blissbarb Seekers and Slickblade Seekers over there, and the Ungor. Would have sent Durthu in to clear that unit and strike and fade away because he summoned the tree. But he failed the Sway Swarm Hive, as every Sylvaneth player knows it happens. But, I mean, with 5 rounds, on average, it's going to happen once a game. Happened there, so I was super happy about that, obviously. But that Wildwood really changed up my game plan. Or really is a cause for concern. Because the spell ranges of it, I know there's a 9-inch bubble that he's doing AoE mortal wounds. So I have to be super cognizant of that. He still had 2d3 of the 3d3 mortal wound bombs from the Night Vetchlors. He used one and threw a Vetchlor on the objective for cunning maneuver, so he used it in case he died. The other thing I had to be aware of was the 12-inch range from the tree for the AoE, or not the AoE, but the mortal wound spell that is anti-horde and would kill 8-9 Blissbarb archers, and not something I want to do. I know with my list that I can lose a lot of my other peripheral pieces, but I like the Blissbarbs are like kind of the backbone of the army. I need them for output. So all game I kind of then pivoted my army this way with my units of Blissbarb archers, and this is where this train piece got in my own way. So where I would have loved to like move my second unit of Blissbarbs here, that train piece, again, getting my own way, stopped me from pushing too far towards the center, as well as this tree did too, kind of clogged the lane. So I ended up moving both my units of Blissbarb archers around the outside. In this mission, with kind of his turn 1 and then my turn 1 also being rather conservative with my Blissbarbs, I had Slick Blades on the objective. I think I had Bellator on the objective back here, and Blissbarb Seekers here. So similar to like what we've talked about earlier, my opponent, Alexei, played conservative turn 1 so that he could set up to give away turn 2. This mission is a slow to start one, so he didn't want to have to commit stuff that was valuable because obviously I'm going to shoot it. So I similarly set up in a position where I wanted to give away turn 2 priority. Also big on this mission because you activate objectives. So I had activated the center objective. Alexei won priority. So I think there are 2, from my perspective, there's obviously more, and there were lots of things like Darthu that go both ways for each player. And this felt like actually you look at it from a luck perspective, this felt like a very even game. He won the first 2 priorities though. I did win the second 2, but I think the turn 2 priority was probably the most important one for this game. It allowed him to activate his home objective, and stop me from activating my own home one, giving him his. That would have been huge. This would have been game winning. I legitimately think if I win turn 2 priority, I win the game, because I am activating the center of the board in my home objective. Alexei now has to come and commit stuff to those objectives, and he's losing whatever he commits. Throughout the game, he just kept feeding little units of Dryads or Tree Revenants or whatnot. And because he had activated his home one, he was able to do that. So that was definitely a pivotal moment. Turn 2, he gave me turn. So I pushed in, tried to kind of pin a bit, left Bellator in the home center objective. Didn't get much shooting output in because of the distances. So where I could have played a little more aggressive. I would have liked to play this second center unit more aggressive, but again, that my own terrain piece was blocking up the lanes for me. I should have pushed this unit a little more forward too, at the risk of taking 2d3 mortal wounds. 2d3 isn't the worst. I had the Undoors screening up here. Yeah, trying to do it. I only got 3 points on my turn, but Alexei isn't able to take the center objective on his turn. We're tied 6-6 going into round 3. He wins priority again. I had Bellator Darthu bottom of 2. And just to prevent one of his damage output pieces, I was torn between Bellatoring Darthu or the Warsong Revenant. I feel like in hindsight, the Warsong Revenant might have been the better pick, but with Darthu, there were three 3 rolls that could stop him from doing something meaningful. Whereas with the War Song, if I failed the magic, he's fully effective and Bellacor's ability was useless. Though I think stopping the magic would have been bigger, he basically eviscerated my Blissbarb archers and my Blissblade Seekers and Slitblade Seekers that were over here that couldn't get far enough from the tree, and that was painful. Alexi won priority into 3, took the turn to finish off these units, even though it meant Durthu wasn't doing anything, but finish off those units was big with all the magic and shooting. Alexi then did take the center objective, just narrowly took down Be'lakor. Drake just struck and fade away, but she was starting to take some damage because of the depravity or the temptation. So she was, the mortal wounds hurt the trees quite bad. All in, so Alexi stored 5 on his turn. I had activated this other objective, so there were his home and these 2 center ones. Oh, you can't see where I'm my mouse, but you can see as I draw. Okay. So let's see if I can change that real quick. Capture cursor. Okay. Oh, ruined my green screen. There we go. Still not able to see it very well. So, Alexi came on, got some Dryads on, had a GC on, Drycha struck and faded away, put some Dryads on this objective, so he scored 5 points. Bottom of 3, I take this objective back. I put Slick Blades into the Dryads, shoot them a bunch. What felt like an inevitable, automatic of killing 10 Dryads. I know they had -1 hit and wound. But with the shooting I put into them and, a unit of Slick Blades, I left 3 Dryads, alive, and he had the GC hero. So he had 5 bodies. My Slick Blades only had 4 models. So this literally, I think, in my mind was the TSN turning point that got me in trouble in this match of not taking this middle objective. I only scored 3 points. I still had play throughout the rest of the game, but having not won turn 2 priority, that hurt. That would have been very much put things in my favor, but dropping the 2 points from hold 2 and hold more here literally was the difference between winning and losing this game. So this was a painful, disappointing 2 points dropped. And just to kind of summarize throughout the rest of the game, we both played a very measured game of not taking too many risks, playing conservatively. He's able to strike and fade away from my stuff. Eventually, he did have to commit in the later part of the game. And I'm, taking down Drycha and Durthu. And going into turn 5, and I win priority into 5. At this point, I know I'm going to deny him some points. Or I need to deny him some points because he's got a 2-point lead on me throughout the game. So I need to deny him points, deny his grand strategy. Mine's automatic. I need to do something to deny him points. So I put, with clearing Drycha and Durthu, I put Bliss Barbs, a big unit across these 2 objectives. I put my GC hero in the center. I put my other unit of Bliss Barbs here, and they actually charged into his 1 remaining GC hero. Trying to finish it off in combat because I had mortals on 6s. I wrapped around it, so it got stuck in combat bottom of round 5. I had to do 5 wounds. 5 or 6 wounds, with 10 attacks into him each round. Mortals on 6s. Long story short, I left that hero on 2 wounds after the 2 combat activations, and with having to make that charge in, I had originally measured against it, but having to make that charge in and trying to get that GC hero down, It did open the door for Alexi to summon a Wildwood here. He then, that GC hero lived. He went into combat with the Warsong Revenant, teleported, grabbed this objective. He held these two, scored 4 points, bottom of 5, to my 5, and wins the game by 1. So I tried to deny as many points as I could. He had good battle tactics. Like neither of us failed any battle tactics. So if that GC hero goes down, I win. Survived with 2 wounds. It was a dicey, situation. So little things in hindsight that could have been done differently. Again, I had originally planned to zone out with those Bliss Barbs, but they had to go forward. I could have left my hero here and finish off Drycha in combat with my Bliss Barb Archers, doing Mortals on 6s. Thanks, babe. Mama Cass coming in hot with some kind thoughts. Had her and Jaina cheering me on from home. Yeah, disappointing one. In hindsight, again, little things. I could have left the epitome back to deny that tree summon. There's still all potential that he puts Dryads over here and his other hero over here if I do that, and then the Bliss Barbs can't contest both objectives, so he takes one of those anyways. So I don't know if I could deny him holding 2 objectives. But what I think I could have done was actually, with my final shooting phase, I just guaranteed taking down Drycha and Durthu. I think I could have split some attacks. It's risky. It's tough. Yeah, there was the opportunity to try and split attacks to kill the 5 remaining Dryads that he stored Desecrate with. And also, killing those Dryads in shooting would have allowed me to shoot some shots at the GC hero as well. Potentially, again, even 2 more damage, and I win the game. But woulda, shoulda, coulda. Like, you gotta go for the guaranteed things. I need to take down Drycha and Durthu. Failing to take them down, going into combat, it's always risky. I maybe played it. Could have taken a little more risk there, and it could have paid off. Yeah. That's it. The GC hero survived 2 wounds. He was able to have 2 objectives, stores battle tactic for 4 points, win by 1. Amazing game. Alexi was awesome to play. Super great sport. I realistically, I went into game 5 honestly already content with the tournament, and maybe played a little too conservative because of it, where I was honestly happy with the outcome. But if I lost the final game, I knew I was going to be happy. I was with the tournament. I went 4 wins, on top table, fighting for the tournament win with an army that I had less than 5 games experience with before the weekend. I can't really ask for much more. I was very, happy and thankful to be in that spot. So still happy. Came in 6th overall afterwards, or 6th in the rankings afterwards. I think when the game, is great game again with Alexi, super great sport. Can't say enough about how awesome it was to play him. Really enjoyed it. Was happy to shake his hand and congratulate him after the game. I think as that night and like the day since have gone on, it's like almost weighed heavier on me since than it did like even in the moment of losing the game. Just you think back of what could have gone differently or you could have done differently. I came 2nd at the event last year. Like, this is, for whatever reason, consistently, like, I have always done well at Grand Clash, and would have loved to take the top spot. So coming close hurts, but that's part of life. So I am saying juicy hero, Nick. It was a juicy Stormcast hero. Yeah. So Slaanesh vibes getting to me. All in. Alexei was super deserving. Played an excellent game. It made minimal mistakes. I think there was one where I was able to unleash hell. He tried to eat an unleash hell from like my 2 bid units, so that Durthu could charge in, and the unit that he charged with to eat the unleash hell actually got far enough where I could unleash hell with the back unit, allowing the front unit to still be able to unleash hell the next target. Thoughts on tournaments locking top table for first and second? In terms of like table 1, I mean, I like having tables ranked in order of standings. I think it allows players to kind of have a quick, measure of where they are. I'm a fan. I could see I could totally understand if people don't like that. Yeah, I think like here, table 1 was like a bit away from the other tables. Not much, like maybe 5 feet further. It had a little bit more space around it. I think that's a great thing. It not only allowed us to, in the most pivotal, game of the tournament that was deciding who was going to be the overall winner, it allowed us to kind of have a little more breathing room, and also allowed people to have room to like stand around and watch, which there wouldn't have been if we were in the middle of the room. I think I'm talking more physical table location, where Nick is talking about cutting to like a top 4 or top 8. Nick, that's something that major events do. This event, I think we ended up with 4 5-0 players, so it's a few. But I think it's fine, honestly, unless you're getting 8 undefeated players, or even maybe 6. You're pushing 200 plus players, then maybe you cut to a top 8 when you're getting to that point. But it means you're playing rounds 1 to 3 on Friday, and it's much harder for people to get to the event. Quebec, like this event is awesome, and it's gets so much support from Canadians, and there are a bunch of Americans that were there also, which is awesome to see. A bunch of our friends coming up. But being a more local focused event, it's not LVO, it's not Nova. People aren't flying it across the country as much or on as large of a scale. You're gonna cut out a lot of your locals from being able to attend. So I'm a fan. I totally understand LVO, Nova. I'm happy they do it, but I think under like 200 players, you just accept that there's gonna be multiple undefeated players, which I think is totally fine. It's not the end of the world. Yeah. Biggest take on the new Soulblight book. So Nick, helping submarining, I think there's a couple things that I like that I've seen at tournaments. First, here, victory points was the second metric. So even if you go, store low your first game, sure, you're playing people who also scored low, so theoretically easier matchups. It also means you're lower in the standings. So even if you go undefeated, you're not coming out in top spots. So especially without having a top 8 cut or something, getting every point you can is important, and you're punishing yourself if you drop points purposefully or anything to submarine or even by accident or not on purpose. So I like that. The other thing I like is having day 1 being random pairings within bracket. This is something that Nova did that I thought was awesome. I don't remember if they did it for just day 1 or day 1 and day 2, but random within bracket means the pairings were based on wins, but not overall standings. So after round 1, everybody that had won one game was randomly drawn against another person with one win. And same for, rounds 2 and rounds 3. I really liked it for the first couple rounds. Then maybe, Swiss pairings for the next couple. It gives people, it's a little bit more random for those early games to set the standings, which because it can be really tough. You almost get punished in Swiss for playing against tough opponents, where random within bracket helps balance that a little bit, like tough matchups and tough opponents. Because like I did, I was having to play, from round, 3 onwards or 2 onwards. I think it was round 3 onwards. I had to play the guy who was in first or second every round, which is a tougher road. Now I don't mind it. It's not the end of the world. It's not, I'm not upset with that, but I think random within bracket kind of is a little more even playing field for those early rounds where there's a lot of randomness through pairings and missions can dictate things. So I like that for establishing kind of the standings, and then day 2 you go into Swiss. Nick, this was 100. So Grand Clash was 146 players. I think, again, there were 4 undefeated, 5. I think there was 4 undefeated and 1 for 4 and a draw. But again, and I think under 200 is fine. Whatever. Either way, I'm gonna enjoy the event. Makes it easier for a lot of people if it's just Friday, Saturday. So it's up to events to determine whether that's gonna hurt them or help them. And that's basically everything, guys. I hope that was not too long-winded. Obviously talked for a while. Gonna dive into one last thing, at least. Slaanesh, depravity points. I literally asked, because there was like some talk of some people not liking the Slaanesh mechanic. I was super cognizant of that with my opponents during the games. I brought Hershey's Kisses, the chocolates, to tempt my opponents with, to try and make it a little more fun if anybody was going to be sour about it or not enjoy that mechanic. So I tried to make it fun to begin with, but I think I asked my opponents. I don't think anyone actually said they didn't like the mechanic. Everyone thought it was cool, interesting, made for tough choices, was an interesting element to the game. It was strong, not overpowered. That was kind of the gist and the vibes that I was getting from people, or the feedback. So that's, yeah, I think the mechanic's great. I think it's really unique, really interesting. Is it strong? Yeah. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so. Every army has its strengths and weaknesses. And yeah, overall, I think the mechanic was cool. I would love to play with it some more with a different grand strategy. So it's, again, like we talked about at the beginning, there are some different trade-offs, and I can actually do some summoning. That's awesome. Paperboy used German sweets. I'm not going to try and pronounce them for temptation, but yeah, I think doing fun stuff like that is always nice. Makes it fun, trying to engage with your opponent in fun ways, in positive ways. But he asked about my list. You can check out the list after we're done the stream. If you just want to scroll back in the timeline of this video, talked about the list and go through things at the start. So you can check that out. But guys, I think that's it. Again, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this wasn't too long. It was long for me. Thank you for sticking with us, and I'll talk to you soon. We'll see you again in another video. We got a battle report coming out this week later for our premium members. If you want to check that out, it's Blades of Corn and Iron Jaws. It's an awesome match with a lot of cool techie things going on. Definitely check it out. Again, guys, thank you so much for your support. Appreciate you, and thank you for sticking with me here tonight and chatting. Super enjoyed it. See you soon in another video.